The sun had barely begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of gold and pink, when our backyard lit up with laughter, clinking glasses, and the warm hum of celebration. Balloons swayed gently from the pergola, and a banner that read "Congratulations, Graduate," fluttered in the autumn breeze. I should have felt unstoppable, triumphant, like the world had finally tipped in my favor. Instead, something about the night gnawed at the edges of my happiness. Guests milled around, sipping punch and complimenting my cap and gown. Friends I hadn't seen in months congratulated me with hugs. And my teachers, who had once doubted my persistence, smiled with pride. My heart should have soared, I should have laughed without restraint. But behind the glittering decorations and the cheerful chatter, I sensed fissures, hidden cracks in the foundation I'd always assumed was solid. I first noticed it when my dad leaned close to my mom, speaking in a whisper so quiet I shouldn't have heard, though somehow I did. The words were soft, almost intimate, but they carried a weight that made the room feel colder. I couldn't catch the meaning, but I felt the sting of exclusion, the prickling certainty that it wasn't something about the party, it was about me. My mom's hand tightened around his arm and she nodded, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I shook my head, forcing a laugh, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe my dad was just commenting on the food or the flowers. Yet the unease didn't fade. It nestled into my chest like a stone, heavy and unyielding. I looked toward my sister, expecting to see her bouncing around, congratulating me, teasing me about my awkward graduation photos. Instead, she was slipping out the side gate, her departure so quiet that I almost missed it. Her eyes met mine for a brief, fleeting second, a glance filled with something I couldn't name. Guilt, complicity, or perhaps relief. I tried to focus on my friends, on the laughter of my cousins, and the music drifting from the speakers. I took pictures, posed with my proud teachers, and even cut the cake, smiling through it all. But every time I glanced toward the adults, there was that shadow of whispered secrets, of conversations I wasn't meant to overhear. I realized bitterly that this celebration, this milestone I had worked so hard to reach, wasn't purely mine to enjoy. It was tainted by things unspoken. I forced myself to swallow the lump of unease in my throat. I didn't want to ruin the night. I wanted to laugh and dance and feel the warmth of accomplishment without suspicion crawling behind my ribs. Still, a small, stubborn flame of doubt and hurt flickered inside me. If my family could whisper and leave me out of their small conspiracies, then maybe the world I thought I knew wasn't as safe as I believed. And yet, deep down, a strange clarity was forming. Tonight was mine, whether they recognized it or not. I didn't yet know how, but I sensed that this party, with its balloons and laughter and shadows of betrayal, would be the beginning of something far larger. Something that would make the whispers, the sidelong glances, and my sister's quiet departure meaningless compared to what I would do next. The day after my graduation, the lingering warmth of accomplishment should have carried me through. Instead, a strange heaviness settled over me. The echoes of last night's whispers haunted me, and my sister's silent exit replayed in my mind like a paused scene from a movie I couldn't quite understand. I couldn't shake the feeling that something about my family, my home, the people I had trusted the most, had shifted while I slept. It started with small details. The whispers I had overheard weren't just idle comments. I began noticing patterns in their behavior that painted a clearer picture. My dad's hand brushed my mother's arm more often, his glances loaded with meanings that didn't include me. My mom smiled politely when I spoke, but her eyes darted away, as if she had secrets too heavy to share. And my sister who had always been a shadow of me in some ways, a rival I didn't fully understand, was distant, unnervingly composed, as if the last night's chaos had been her victory. I thought back to my father's whisper, straining to remember the exact words. Something about it tugged at the edges of memory, a phrase that had felt innocent at the time, but now seemed like a knife hidden in silk. Was it about me, about my achievements, or worse, about something I didn't even know? My stomach twisted, a knot of betrayal tightening with each replay of that moment. Then pieces of the past began to make sense. All the subtle slights, the quiet dismissals, the moments I had laughed off as clumsiness or carelessness, they weren't random. My accomplishments had always been met with polite praise, never the pride I had imagined. My achievements had been quietly measured against someone else's standards, someone else's dreams, someone else's expectations. And suddenly, I realized my sister's absence last night wasn't just avoidance. It was strategy. She had known. She had known what would happen and had chosen to sidestep it, leaving me alone to absorb the tension, the judgment, the invisible cruelty. The more I thought about it, the more anger swelled inside me. It wasn't just disappointment. It was a sharp, bitter realization that I had been underestimated, overlooked, and in some small but meaningful ways, betrayed by the people I had trusted most. My father, who had always been my authority, my supposed supporter, my mother, the person I believed had my back no matter what. My sister, the one person I thought shared my victories as much as my defeats, but the anger was tempered by clarity. I could feel the beginnings of something else, a quiet, deliberate determination. This wasn't the end. This moment, this understanding of their duplicity, was the foundation for what I would do next. I didn't yet have a plan, but I could see the outlines forming. Whatever whispered judgments had passed between them, whatever silent agreements had been made, I would ensure they couldn't hide behind them forever. I began to observe more keenly, noticing the subtle dynamics, the way my dad avoided my gaze, how my mom's smile faltered when I looked too closely, and the way my sister's posture shifted when I entered a room. Every action, every glance became a thread in the tapestry I was slowly unraveling. And as I stood there, feeling the weight of my family's hidden truths, I realized one thing with perfect, cold clarity. The world had underestimated me, and that mistake would be theirs to regret. Days passed, and the world around me continued as if nothing had changed. Friends congratulated me, teachers praised me, and life went on. But inside, a storm was raging, a tempest of betrayal, grief, and a slowly building fire of determination. Every time I thought of my dad's whispered words, my mom's evasive glance, or my sister's quiet departure, my chest tightened. Their smiles, once comforting, now felt like masks hiding indifference or worse, silent judgment. I spent hours replaying their faces in my mind, dissecting every glance and phrase, searching for cracks, for truths that had been hidden in plain sight. My sister's behavior gnawed at me the most. The way she had slipped away from the party, leaving me alone in a room full of people, had been deliberate. She had known, and she had chosen not to care, or perhaps she had been complicit. The thought burned, a bitter heat that left me restless and sleepless at night. I began to think about all the times I had sought approval from them, moments I had silently cherished, only to be met with half-hearted praise or subtle dismissal. My father, always the stoic presence, had measured my successes against some invisible standard, never letting me feel truly accomplished. My mother, the one I had trusted to protect me, had quietly agreed with his judgments, offering comfort that felt shallow and rehearsed. And my sister, my supposed family, had been watching, calculating, perhaps even enjoying my discomfort in ways I had only now begun to suspect. Anger, sharp and unrelenting, mingled with grief and confusion. I realized that the past, so carefully curated in my memory as a haven, was filled with quiet betrayals I had chosen not to notice. Every whispered criticism, every sidelong glance, Every act of omission became a stone in a wall that separated me from the family I had thought I knew. And in that realization, a strange clarity emerged. I did not need their validation, their recognition, or their approval. I needed only the truth and a way to make them see it. The idea of revenge began as a whisper in my mind, tentative but persistent. Not violent, not cruel in a way that could destroy me, but precise, measured, emotional, unforgettable. I would not scream, I would not fight, I would not beg for attention. I would craft a moment, a revelation, so piercing that it would leave them speechless, so undeniable that they could no longer hide behind their smiles and whispers. I began to observe them more keenly, cataloging behaviors and patterns, noting what triggers pride, shame, and discomfort. My sister's smirk when she thought I wasn't looking, my mother's hesitation before she spoke, my father's subtle tightening of his jaw when he was caught off guard. Every detail was ammunition, every nuance a tool I could wield in my favor, and beneath the anger, a strange excitement began to take root. I could almost taste the moment when the whispers would falter, when the carefully constructed illusions would crumble. I would not be the overlooked child, the ignored graduate, the silent observer of my own celebration. I would have the final word, the ultimate recognition, and it would come not from begging or pleading, but from a revelation so sharp, so emotionally devastating, that they would have no choice but to see me truly for the first time. The storm inside me was no longer just anger. It had become strategy. It had become purpose, and as I paced my room late into the night, drafting mental plans, rehearsing words, and imagining reactions, I realized that the graduation party was only the beginning. The real event, my vindication, my emotional triumph had yet to unfold, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The night of my graduation party had come full circle. The backyard sparkled with fairy lights, laughter bounced off the walls, and music wove through the air like silk. Friends and relatives were mingling, glasses raised, unaware of the tension simmering just beneath the surface. I stood near the center, a quiet observer, feeling the weight of every whispered conversation, every furtive glance, every absence and betrayal from that night, and the years before. My dad leaned toward my mom again, speaking softly, his words clipped and guarded. My sister lingered near the edge of the patio, a phantom in the periphery of my vision, her expression carefully unreadable. And I, the supposed child of the house, the one they had underestimated, watched it all with a clarity that sharpened with every heartbeat. I felt a strange thrill as I stepped forward, raising my glass to call everyone's attention. The chatter dimmed and eyes turned toward me. For the first time that night, I held their full attention, not as a graduate to be praised politely, not as the quiet observer, not as the overlooked child, but as someone who had seen the truth and was ready to make it impossible to ignore. My graduation is supposed to be a celebration. I began, my voice steady, slicing through the murmurs like a knife. A celebration of years of hard work, dedication, and perseverance. And yet tonight, I've realized that it's also a reflection, a mirror of the truths we sometimes hide from ourselves and from those we claim to love. Eyes widened, my father's jaw tightened, my mother's grip on her glass faltered, my sister's shoulders stiffened, the first real crack in her composed mask. "You see," I continued, letting my gaze sweep the room, lingering for a heartbeat too long on each of them. "There are whispers behind smiles, quiet departures when confrontation seems imminent, and invisible walls that are built to diminish someone's joy. And yes, I noticed them, I saw them, I've carried them with me, and I will not carry them anymore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My friends shifted, confused but attentive. My parents exchanged a glance, panic flickering across their faces for the first time. And my sister, who had always danced in the shadows, finally looked directly at me, a mixture of fear and guilt flashing in her eyes. "I've spent years seeking approval, striving to make you proud," I said, voice rising but controlled, "but I've realized that your approval is neither my responsibility nor my measure of worth. Tonight, I stand not just as your graduate, but as someone who refuses to be diminished by the quiet betrayals of the people I trusted most." Silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I let it linger, savoring the moment, letting the weight of my words sink deep into the hearts of the ones who had underestimated me. "And so," I said finally with a soft, almost serene smile, "I announce that this celebration is mine. Not yours to whisper about, not yours to control. I am proud of myself, I am strong, and I will no longer let the shadows of your secrets define me." The crowd erupted into applause, some tentative, some sincere, but it was the sound of validation that truly mattered. My parents were frozen, speechless, while my sister finally stepped back, unable to meet my gaze. In that moment, I felt a surge of liberation, a fierce, sweet triumph. The whispers were meaningless now, the quiet departures inconsequential. I had taken control of my story, and the ones who had doubted me would never forget it. Tonight I was not just the graduate, I was the victor,